With each new edition of Call of Duty Black Ops, new iterations and innovative changes were added to the Zombies game mode. By judging each new change by originality, as well as how influential it was over the rest of the series, the evolutionary value of each map throughout the Zombies game type can be determined. After World at War, Black Ops 1 gave the Zombies mode the space it needed to truly spread its wings, elevating the series with memorable Zombies epics alongside equally unforgettable classics. Preceding Black Ops 1, Call of Duty Zombies' next arena would redefine the game once again. On the 12th of November 2012, the Black Ops series would have its first official sequel. Black Ops 2, a sophisticated follow-up to the highly revered first game, set in what was referred to then as the near-distant future. Black Ops 2 continued the story from Black Ops 1, with themes of revenge, terrorism, and anarchy in a world of future technology. The game's campaign flipped between the past and the future throughout its story, being set in both the 1980s and the year 2025. But as per the ending of the Zombies story in Black Ops 1's Moon, the Zombies' journey in Black Ops 2 would begin upon the desolate hellscape of the post-apocalyptic, burning Earth. Black Ops 2's Zombies saw some of the most interesting contention and controversies within the Zombies community, having produced some of the most favoured zombie maps in Call of Duty history, as well as some of the least favoured. Maps aside, Black Ops 2 saw another general increase in quality and investment into the Zombies game mode, boasting a grand total of 9 maps, 2 additional sideline modes, and other extra features, such as a Zombies leaderboard and ranking system. Compared to Black Ops 1 and World at War, the sound design in Black Ops 2 displayed more variety. Because the game's campaign switched back and forth between the past and the future, Black Ops 2 featured many weapons hailing from totally different eras, resulting in a unique blend of old and new for the game's multiplayer mode and zombie mode. Comparing the various weapons to those in Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2's weapons were smoother, humbler, and generally carried less audio flair. The sound direction depicted by Black Ops 2's many rifles, pistols, shotguns, and grenades was less like the proud, thundering sense of impact stressed in Black Ops 1, and was rather akin to something more rustic, like a drum snare. After the glorious success of Black Ops 1 from Kino to Toten through each and every DLC, player expectations and anticipation for the next edition of Zombies were undoubtedly high. These raised expectations led to what was potentially one of the most controversial starts to a Black Ops Zombies game, Black Ops 2's highly infamous first map, Tranzit. As a new game would no doubt present new mechanics and iterations on the Zombies mode, players could expect at least a few changes. But while Black Ops 2's zombie mode was fundamentally the same as Black Ops 1 and World at War, it was Tranzit's unusual level design that was a little too different to what players might have been accustomed to. To premiere Black Ops 2, Tranzit invited players to a remote American corner of the post-apocalyptic wasteland. Black Ops 2's initial overarching style and theme for zombies revolved around survival in a devastated world, with focus on scavenging and scrapping broken tools to forge half-functional weapons and means of defense. Tranzit introduced crafting, Black Ops 2's major new mechanic. Players could find parts in specific areas of the map and craft them together at a workbench to build contraptions, some of which appeared fairly unorthodox, while others veered on ludicrous. While Black Ops 1 did in fact present the ability to pick up items here and there, it was Black Ops 2 that truly dived into the feature of part finding and crafting, fleshing it out as its signature mechanic. Ever since Tranzit, crafting has remained a defining cornerstone of the Call of Duty Zombies game mode, dubbing it one of the most successful core iterations the game mode would dare to introduce, on the level of implementing perks back in Verrucht. Transit's own signature mechanic was the bus, which travelled automatically on a route around the entire map. Vehicle-based transportation would see some reprisal in Call of Duty Zombies down the line, but it never became as prominent as the more accessible shortcuts such as the teleporters. Much like Transit's signature new mechanics, the map's many reiterations of mechanics in the game mode that already existed, namely perks, weapons, and enemy types, were uncustomary in themselves. The map's new perk Tombstone utilised a backup system for players who had died rather than provide any actual support while fighting the zombies. Given Transit's oversized layout, this perk was likely designed to compensate for the fact that players would be unlikely to travel the often egregious distance to revive one another, and was a way for players to somewhat stay in the game if this ever occurred. In addition to its bizarre and particular condition of use in co-op, Tombstone remains the only perk, aside from the original Quick Revive from World at War, to have literally no function in solo. Transit's new wonder weapon, the Jet Gun, made use of the part finding and crafting mechanic, as did the Pack-a-Punch. Alongside the zombies, Transit introduced two new enemies, one of which earned its own new category. The denizens were area-specific, only appearing when players entered certain parts of the map. The concept of area-specific enemies in zombies never became immensely prevalent, but did see a few instances of revival in later examples. Transit's mini-boss, the Avogadro, would spawn in several rounds after the power had been activated, and was capable of stunning and damaging players with electricity. Now the fourth instance of a terrain hazard in Black Ops Zombies, the lava in Transit acted both as a danger for players and a new variable affecting the zombies themselves. Any zombie that walked through the lava would catch fire, causing them to violently explode when eventually killed. Perhaps the most different and unconventional of mechanics introduced to zombies in Transit was the new system involving the game's points, the bank. In Transit, as well as in two of Black Ops 2's other maps, players had the option to deposit points by the thousand in a bank, which could then be withdrawn at a small interest cost. The bank would save and remember each player's individual deposits between games, meaning players could save up an insurmountable number of points, deposit them in a bank, end the game, and withdraw as many points as they wished in a later session. The highly unusual style and nature of this new mechanic suggested a shift in the mode's gameplay direction from relatively linear to being something more of a sandbox. The argument that Transit took the zombies genre in the direction of something more sandbox-like was further supported by the map's peculiar level design. Transit's layout featured predominantly open spaces, and unlike any zombie map before in Black Ops 1 or World at War, players could technically go wherever they wanted right from the start without having to spend too many points. Players were given immediate access to larger areas and were encouraged to unlock other smaller areas as they chose, giving them even more freedom in contrast with the famous two-path formula from Black Ops 1. This more open level design format would be cultivated again in the later maps of Black Ops 2, where players would start in a larger central area of the map to unlock surrounding sections at their own pace, rather than choosing between two identical paths that both led to the same goal. Though this new open level design concept would see more veritable success later, Transit's layout and level design was lethargic and often counterproductive. The Call of Duty Zombies experience thrived on restricting and confining players to a particular location, and forcing them to fight and survive with what little they had. Transit attempted to keep players inside the individual map areas by placing all-consuming fog in the spaces between them and filling the fog with lava and denizens that would attempt to claw your face off. While this may have worked as a general deterrence, Transit itself went back on this design element by placing objectives such as parts of the wonder weapon or steps in the Easter egg in areas that were unreachable without traversing the fog. In addition to Transit, the map's subsections were available as individual maps on their own, each offering a more bare-bones experience reminiscent of the original zombies from World at War. Bus Depot offered the most bare-bones experience like Nuketown, featuring only a door, some war buys, and a mystery box. Farm was only a little more complicated, adding the 4 original perks from favoured, and Town encapsulated something more moderate, with 6 perks and the Pack-a-Punch. With Transit as its debut flagship map, Black Ops 2 was certainly off with what could be considered a rough start. The main craftable items on the map were too hassling to accomplish and proved underwhelming when completed, often resulting in something that wasn't worth the time and effort put into finding and crafting the parts. Due to Tranzit playing so differently to the previous forms of Call of Duty Zombies, players ended up opting in favour of playing the smaller maps such as Town for what was at least a feasible Zombies experience. In retrospect, players may have hoped to appreciate Tranzit by playing it with a particular mindset, a group of survivors struggling against extinction by finding and using whatever they could, without much hope of surviving too long. However, when considering what players must have been expecting after experiencing Zombies epics such as Call of the Dead and Moon, Tranzit's unusual playstyle and overly ambitious level design were unsurprisingly disappointing. Available the day after Black Ops 2 was released to anyone who pre-ordered the game or bought the Season Pass was Nuketown, technically Black Ops 2's second map. The map was set in the familiar Nuketown testing facility famous from the multiplayer, now infested with zombies after what appears to have been a successful nuclear test. As the level was more or less an identical copy of the original multiplayer map, it was rather limited in size and featured a quaint and simple layout. In all respects, Nuketown was simpler than even some of the earliest maps from Black Ops 1, Kino de Toten and 5, with only one unique mechanical iteration to its name. Every so often in Nuketown, a siren would ring out over the map, indicating the map's singular unique feature. Moments after the siren was called, a random perk machine would fall out of the sky in a fireball and land somewhere in the vicinity of the map. While this was the map's sole new mechanic, and it may have been gimmicky in nature, the feature added an appropriate level of difficulty, intrigue, and replayability. Simple as the mechanic was, between the random order in which the perks would land, as well as the number of spots in which they could, no two games of Nuketown were ever the same. The map additionally contained small Easter eggs here and there, hinting at connections to the main Easter egg on Moon. While Nuketown may have appeared lackluster for a preliminary DLC experience, it was easy to enjoy as a frantic, unpredictable survival game. One of Black Ops 2's few early strengths was its unparalleled map variety upon its release, and Nuketown found a welcome spot in the array of early maps. Two and a half months after the game's release, Black Ops 2 would produce its first proper, fully fledged DLC. The new map's loading screen featured a comic strip reminiscent of the loading screens from Black Ops 1. But instead of music, players could hear the distorted sounds of a bustling city, depicting the rapid industrialization of China in the late 20th century. Massive skyscrapers, estranged elevators, dilapidated infrastructure, and zombies. On January 29, 2013, Black Ops 2 initiated its DLC phase with Die Rise. Die Rise was set entirely within two massive buildings in a province of China. One an enormous skyscraper in the wake of its destruction, and a smaller, mustier building crouched beneath it. Die Rise continued the post-apocalypse visual style and setting from Tranzit, showcasing the semi-intact remains of the ravaged building, bisected as a result of missiles sent from the moon. When playing Die Rise, much of the map from the collapsed elevator shaft in the skyscraper to the concrete maze of the lower building appears ominous, dark, and dead. Much like maps on Black Ops 1, it wasn't until the power switch was reached and activated that the map would truly come to life. Upon activating said power, players were immediately directed to Die Rise's signature mechanic. Shared between the two buildings were a set of 7 elevators which moved up and down the various floors. Players could ride these elevators to more easily shift between different building levels, making them essential in navigating Die Rise's vertical layout. Each elevator carried a random perk machine within a particular selection, with the smaller building rotating between Juggernog, Mule Kick, Double Tap, and the Pack-a-Punch, and the skyscraper having Quick Revive, Speed Cola, and the map's new perk, Who's Who. Much like Tranzit's Tombstone, the effects of Who's Who were confusing and seemed more or less redundant, even a hindrance in some situations, and as such it would often be given up in favour of the other pre-existing perks. Die Rise reintroduced the Nova Crawlers from Kino de Toten, reconfiguring them into the more eccentric jumping jacks. The jumping jacks particularly complemented Die Rise's claustrophobic interior segments, exhibiting the creature's tendency to rigorously bounce from wall to wall. Like Tranzit, Die Rise incorporated the part finding and crafting mechanic credited to Black Ops 2, which could now be used to craft a new contraption and a new wonder weapon. The Sliquifire was a welcome improvement after Tranzit's more lackluster jet gun, with excellent damage and decent ammo supply, as well as the added gimmick of causing the zombies to slip clumsily around. The Sliquifire further continued Black Ops 2's main theme of scavenging. The weapon demonstrated human ingenuity amidst the remains of a post-apocalyptic world, as opposed to simply receiving a magical superweapon at random chance like in Black Ops 1. Die Rise was the first, and truthfully the only Call of Duty Zombies map to incorporate and explore verticality as a major factor of its level design. Though technically Die Rise's layout started with just 2 paths leading from the spawn room, these paths varied massively in comparison with the usual Black Ops 1 2-path level design. Die Rise's overall layout was very much an open level design like Tranzit's, but it was far more coherent and concise. Players were given access to sizable chunks of the map without having to spend too many points, and the entire space could be navigated with relative ease. Moreover, Die Rise's unique layout allowed players to create their own shortcuts by using the trample steam to cross between the 2 buildings. Though the map was a certain improvement after Tranzit, Die Rise's overall reception was a mixed bag as the map was deemed frustrating for different reasons. Die Rise had an unrivaled capacity for killing players through fall damage. A player not paying enough attention near the edges of the map or a vacant elevator shaft could potentially mean instant death, with no chance for revival. Despite this, the map strived in immersing players in its unique atmosphere and design. Die Rise perfectly captured the experience of surviving the undead while trapped inside a half-crumbling high-rise, and was altogether a well-crafted level. But despite the map's strengths, Die Rise would pale punily in comparison to the experience delivered by every map that would come after it. This is because after Die Rise, for the first time in Zombies history since Ascension back at the beginning of Black Ops 1, in terms of overall caliber, the bar was about to be raised. On April 16th, 2013, another 2.5 months after Die Rise, Black Ops 2 released its second DLC, Mob of the Dead. Much like Black Ops 1's second DLC, Call of the Dead, Mob of the Dead featured its own separate cast of playable characters and did not appear to follow any such chronology relating to Black Ops 2's previous maps. But unlike Call of the Dead, Mob of the Dead was more than just an extravagant zombies shooter. It was the story of 4 damned souls condemned to repeat an endless cycle of imprisonment and torment, struggling to attain salvation in a prison from hell. Upon entering the game, players were immediately introduced to Mob of the Dead's unique mechanic. In accordance with the map's intro cutscene, the playable characters had all died, and players needed to return to their bodies as disembodied spectres in order to start the game. Once per round, anytime a player would ordinarily go down and need to be revived, they would instead enter the new Afterlife mode as a spirit. While in this mode, players could interact with key objectives and access hidden areas around the map. The Afterlife mode in Mob of the Dead remains Treyarch's most successful experimental iteration on the Zombies game mode to date. Such ambitious mechanics had not been implemented before, as they carried the monumental risk of alienating the game's player base. However, the Afterlife mechanic succeeded in being familiar and simple enough that it wasn't confusing, as well as being useful to the point where players wouldn't ignore it. The yet unrivaled innovation behind the Afterlife mechanic from Mob of the Dead would light the torch for the major game-changing mechanics of future Black Ops games. Unlike its predecessors Tranzit and Die Rise, Mob of the Dead did not have an alternative open-style level design, and instead adopted Black Ops 1's two-split path layout. While the map inherited Black Ops 2's part-finding and crafting mechanic from previous maps, it iterated on it slightly so that players kept the parts they found permanently in a shared inventory, and parts didn't need to be dropped in order for others to be picked up. This streamlined improvement was so successful that it wouldn't need to be iterated on further in later maps or even later games, being implemented in the exact same way in all of Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4. Mob of the Dead added its own new perk machine, Electric Cherry, which gave players the power to shock and stun nearby zombies while reloading. Electric Cherry worked thematically with Mob of the Dead's constant allusions to the electric chair, and the perk was far more beneficial to have and made a lot more sense than either of Black Ops 2's previous additions. Mob of the Dead featured no unique boss wave, but did instance a new boss enemy. Brutus would begin to spawn during later rounds and wreak havoc throughout the prison, even spawning multiple times in a single wave. Beyond being dangerous and intimidating, Brutus could disable crucial features such as the mystery box and perks, forcing players to pay an expensive toll before these features could be used again. Mob of the Dead featured one main transportation method, the gondola, a perfect example of a shortcut mechanic offering a swift alternative to navigating large sections of the map, as well as a pause in the action to enjoy a decent view of the prison. Technically also a transportation method, the plane reflected a level design concept established in Kino de Toten, wherein certain transportation methods would deliver players directly back and forth from the Pack-a-Punch. In terms of weapons, Mob of the Dead incorporated select examples of gangster and mobster classics like the AK-47, their novel inclusion in the map adding nicely to its character. The map's wonder weapon, the Blundergat, could be obtained randomly from the mystery box just like every wonder weapon from Black Ops 1, but it could also be acquired through a miniature quest, giving players the choice of preference between the two methods. The Blundergat could be upgraded with the Pack-a-Punch, again like all Black Ops 1 wonder weapons, but could also be upgraded with a unique crafted item in the Black Ops 2 style. In this way, Mob of the Dead catered to fans of both games, allowing them to choose between Black Ops 2's objective-based gameplay or the old-fashioned way from Black Ops 1. Last but not least, Mob of the Dead added a completely new kind of weapon. After feeding the 3 Cerberus heads, players could obtain the Hell's Retriever, which inhabited the player's otherwise unfilled secondary grenade slot. The Hell's Retriever was a big step in creativity past previous iterations of secondary weapons like the Gersh device, and may partly have inspired an entirely new class of weapon explored in Black Ops 3. While improvements in game design and exciting new mechanics already complemented the map with a higher status, it was Mob of the Dead's interesting narrative, carried by perfect atmosphere and music, that certified it a step above the rest. Throughout the game, messages on walls as well as the playable characters themselves would often mention the goal of escaping the prison, and players would eventually discover the various plane parts while regularly exploring the map. For the first time, Call of Duty Zombies appeared to have an achievable objective that wasn't as hidden away or complicated as an Easter egg, and Mob of the Dead was the perfect map to introduce it. The concept of potential salvation is unclear on the precipice of a broken building, in an ancient temple, or in the frozen tundra, but in the confines of a prison the objective is obvious: to escape. This idea, inherent in Mob of the Dead's design, marked the true beginning of Call of Duty Zombies' transformation from a simple survival game to something with more substance. Players needn't just survive, they had a purpose, something they needed to fulfill.
Here's the engine, boys. Now what?
Mob of the Dead broke new ground by being the first map to have its own dedicated soundtrack, an idea previously unheard of in the game mode. On a player's journey through the zombie-riddled Alcatraz, different musical pieces would play at opportune moments or in specific areas, adding ambience, intensity, and overall making the map more immersive. Going even further above and beyond the usual zombie standard, Mob of the Dead featured its very own unique round change theme, setting it completely apart from other maps. While different editions throughout Call of Duty Zombies would typically feature 2 or perhaps 3 musical melodies at most, Mob of the Dead had more than 20, signifying an incredible leap in Treyarch's creative ability and its dedication to the Zombies game mode. After finally finding the 5 total plane parts, players were given the opportunity to fly aboard the Icarus with hopes of escaping Alcatraz for good. The plane ride was accompanied by a particular musical score, exonerating the prisoners in their flight towards freedom. But as the plane approached the Golden Gate Bridge, the music began to slow and darken, descending note by note as the prisoners fell from the Icarus. Finally, Mob of the Dead's main theme is played, as the prisoners are reminded of their torment. No one escapes alive. Helplessly trapped upon the Golden Gate Bridge, players were given the choice to return to where they started on Alcatraz, doomed to repeat the hellish cycle again. Mob of the Dead blended the best parts of Black Ops 1's and Black Ops 2's profound iterations on the Zombies game mode, taking the former's classic level design and incorporating the crafting elements and objective-based gameplay of the latter. With this perfect harmony, Mob of the Dead had set the standard for new Call of Duty Zombies maps, inspiring the direction, new mechanics, and use of a dedicated story in maps of later games. Mob of the Dead's utterly immersive atmosphere, attention to detail, and music proved that Treyarch had stepped up their commitment to zombies. With this, the game mode had found its ultimate footing. It was the beginning of an evolution that would see the creation of the game's best ever maps and eventually peak with the genre's golden age. After its release, Mob of the Dead asserted itself at the top of the Black Ops 2 hierarchy and seemed to leave the game's previous editions, namely Die Rise and Transit, in the lurch. While a renewed or alternative perspective could allow more appreciation for Die Rise and Transit, perhaps the sandbox-style gameplay and more open level design simply didn't meld well with the Zombies game mode. However, with Black Ops 2's third DLC, Treyarch would have their last chance to redeem the new original Black Ops 2 map style, following the Transit crew into their last venture. Released July 2nd, 2013, following the 2.5-month break between map releases, players eagerly anticipated Treyarch's third edition to Black Ops 2 Zombies, wondering if it would live up to expectations after Mob of the Dead. The new map started players off in an inconspicuous rustic mining facility. Without much to do, players were forced to explore what little space they had, eventually jumping down and falling through the metal platform. Here, players were unwittingly thrust into the world of Buried, an old western town cluttered with creaking wooden buildings and dusty roads. Already, Buried offered a vastly more interesting first impression than either Transit or Die Rise, beckoning players to explore this intriguing new environment rather than restrict them with fog or fall damage. Much like Mob of the Dead, Buried featured a lengthy soundtrack of songs and musical pieces that perfectly suited the old western theme. Treyarch's addition of a proper original soundtrack 2 maps in a row was proof enough that Zombies had entered a new age. Each iteration of Black Ops 2 Zombies saw its own assortment of unique new mechanics for players to experience, and Buried boasted a plethora of its own. Buried's signature mechanic was the Giant, also known as Arthur, a non-playable character with several unique features to assist players in different ways, depending on how they chose to interact with him. Arthur's most useful capability involved him charging at debris and destroying it, unblocking pathways that were otherwise irremovable, and allowing players to traverse to new areas in the map. Buried's secondary signature mechanic, the Weapon Chalk, was a creative way to give players more control over how the map was played, delivering an immediate sense of contrast to the grittier, more realistic gameplay from Transit and Die Rise. The Transit Die Rise style pathfinding and crafting mechanic returned for the final time in Buried, with the inclusion of the most iconic buildable contraptions from the previous maps, as well as the implementation of 2 new ones. While these contraptions felt more essential in Transit and Die Rise, they were more an optional choice in Buried, the map leaning more towards player exploration and experimentation than coercing them to play the map in a certain way. Buried was the last map in Black Ops 2 to introduce a new perk, Vulture Raid, meaning Black Ops 2 added a grand total of 4 new perks to the Call of Duty Zombies game mode. While these new perks certainly varied quite drastically in popularity and use, Vulture Raid proved more useful than others. A modified version of the Scavenger perk from the multiplayer, Vulture Raid allowed players to replenish some ammo from dead zombies, a vital resource in the game mode, among other smaller but still useful benefits. Buried's new enemies were area-specific, like the Denizens from Transit. The witches would only spawn once players dared to enter the decrepit, harrowing mansion, swarming players to steal their points, or kill them when they had none left to give. Contrary to Transit and Die Rise, the Wonder Weapon in Buried could be accessed randomly by any one player on the map from the mystery box, a decision by Treyarch potentially prompted as a result of fewer players even bothering to craft the Wonder Weapons from Transit and Die Rise at all. Buried's Wonder Weapon, the Paralyzer, could kill zombies with equal efficiency regardless of what round players were on, much like other Wonder Weapons, and had infinite ammo at the cost of killing zombies much more slowly. What made the Paralyzer special, however, was that it allowed the player to sort of fly, adding to the map's emphasis on player freedom by giving them another mode through which to traverse the map. Buried also added a small variety of interesting new weapons such as the Raygun Mark II, an exciting new upgrade to the first original Raygun. Buried and Mob of the Dead saw success where Die Rise and Transit somewhat failed for a variety of reasons, but one in particular is quite interesting and speaks profoundly to the zombies community's overall preference in maps. In all maps leading up to Mob of the Dead, from World at War all the way up to Die Rise, zombies had always drawn elements from fantasy, even magic, but at the same time had strived to stick to a realistic setting. While Moon may have seemed a bit of a stretch, maps prior to Mob of the Dead, including Transit and Die Rise, existed in an environment that was more believable and realistic. Mob of the Dead was the first map to step fully into a fantasy setting. The infamous Alcatraz prison twisted and transformed into a hellscape, with sacrificial altars and hanging corpses, like something out of a dream or nightmare. As Mob of the Dead was highly renowned as a successful DLC map, the conclusion is clear: the zombies community preferred fantasy elements to realism. This preference has been further reflected quite plainly in many maps in the later Zombies games. Like Mob of the Dead, Buried would incorporate a fantasy twist as an added layer of its design. Being underground, the map is not so two-dimensional and simple as an abandoned western town. Buried has character. The town is not just abandoned, but hidden, forgotten, steeped in mystery. Buried's twisted fantasy setting helped convey an astonishing improvement in Treyarch's creativity in making maps, turning the game mode on its head by adding hugely unexpected features akin to the unbelievable and the ridiculous. This shift in map design and direction proved to produce maps that were more interesting to players than the regular, grittier maps that came before. Buried was the final map to feature the open level design concept exclusive to Black Ops 2, and while its implementation into Die Rise and Transit may have felt too unconventional and different, its adaptation into Buried fit the map perfectly. players had immediate access to a generously large area without having to buy even a single door. This area started with the mystery box and as such was treated as a communal hub-like area of the map. From here, players had access to several doors, either via conventional purchase or via Arthur. Players could further choose to open these doors in any order, making Buried the ultimate map and giving players full agency and control over how it is played. Unlike the questionable flow of Transit and even Die Rise's unusual layouts, the level design in Buried was astounding. Tunnels and winding caverns interconnected the entire map, with passageways that led into different buildings. This layout gave players a multitude of pathways into each area and unprecedented opportunity for exploration, stumbling upon new areas and viewpoints to experience the map from a whole new perspective. After just a few playthroughs, players would notice just from looking around that they could go pretty much anywhere. Buried's level design was on the level of legendary, and while Black Ops 3 may be renowned for having some of the best level designs and map layouts ever seen, Buried may have produced the most complex and coherent level design of all time. Each building was perfectly positioned to form pathways while also allowing players to jump between rooftops and move through the map via its sprawling tunnel system. As justifiable as it is to give the map praise, no Zombies map is truly without weakness. Buried's more controversial side came from the argument that the map was too easy, arising from its sandbox-like nature and certain features inherent in Transit-style maps such as the bank. This argument certainly held water. Giving the player as much agency as possible over how they play the map obviously makes the map easier. Whether or not this is a bad thing is a matter of preference. Considering the success of Black Ops 3 and the prominence of Black Ops 2's Mob of the Dead and Origins, the general preference of the Call of Duty Zombies community seemed to lead towards having less control over how the map could be played. Having more unpredictability in a map would naturally make it more challenging, whereas playing through Buried, which gave players the power to do pretty much anything if they knew how, would potentially remove any challenge at all. Regardless of preference, Buried perfected the original Black Ops 2 map style envisioned in Transit and Die Rise, and was a brilliant final map for the Transit Crew trilogy. The music in Buried was mesmerizingly ambient, each track immersing the player fully in this curious and enchanting long-forgotten town. Buried's incorporation of fantasy elements inspired by the success of Mob of the Dead helped bind the map together as one of the most captivating and immersive Call of Duty Zombies experiences the game mode has ever imagined. While the series was initially introduced in World at War, Black Ops 2 could be heralded as the true beginning of what Call of Duty Zombies would become. Progress cannot be made without taking a fair share of risk, as seen in Treyarch's big leap in experimentation with Black Ops 2's flagship map, Transit. Following feedback after each successive map release, Treyarch was able to iterate drastically on every new edition, allowing each map to be better than the last. Compared to the evolution between each map in Black Ops 2, the maps in Black Ops 1 appear quite repetitive, almost stale, relying on changes in scenery over variety in mechanics. Considering that Black Ops 2's zombie maps were better with each release, anticipation for the game's last DLC would be immense. But despite these elevated expectations, no one was prepared for the monster that Treyarch would unleash. Taking all of the best features from Buried and Mob of the Dead, level design, mechanical iteration, music, story, atmosphere, these would all culminate into the final stage of Black Ops 2 Zombies' evolution. On August 27, 2013, only a month and a half after Buried, Treyarch released Origins, the pinnacle of Black Ops 2. Origins was set on the ravaged battlefield of northern France during the First World War. The opening cutscene introduced players to revamped versions of the original 4 characters from World at War and Black Ops 1. These new, more sophisticated renditions of the older characters became so popular as a zombies crew that they were later used in almost every map in Black Ops 3 and half the maps in Black Ops 4. Treyarch had taken everything they'd learned about what makes a successful map and forged it together. Origins took inspiration from Black Ops 1's closed two-path level design as well as Black Ops 2's open level design, combining both layout concepts and forming a hybrid. This unprecedented combination was curated perfectly, solving the major issues that the two individual styles had separately. Starting players off in a closed 2-split layout helped to guide them through the slow initial progress of the early rounds, as opposed to overwhelming and confusing players with too many options at the very start of the game. After a reasonable number of doors, the map transitioned into the open level concept, releasing players from the 2-path level design before it became too claustrophobic and stale. This harmonious blend of the two opposite styles accentuates what makes Origins truly shine, the culmination of Treyarch's efforts in all their previous maps to form something even better.
Can you hear me? Please.
Origins iterated on the base game design of the Zombies mode on a level similar to Mob of the Dead, adding new mechanics that were not too different or far-fetched for players to understand, but that still changed the game in a way that was fresh and interesting. Origins' signature unique mechanic was the generators, which had to be activated in order for players to access essential features such as the mystery box or perk machines. One of these generators resided in the starting area, so players could ease into the mechanic at the start of the game. Expectedly, Origins featured the part-finding and crafting mechanic seen in every Black Ops 2 DLC, and by this point the mechanic was so innate to the game that it would have felt strange had the map not included it. As Buried was the last map to feature the Transit-style part-finding and crafting, Origins adopted the more streamlined version from Mob of the Dead, displaying the many items that players might find on their journey in a shared inventory. While Origins sadly did not introduce any new perks, it instead debuted the Wonderfizz machine, which allowed players to purchase a random perk, some of which could not be obtained elsewhere on the map, or even anywhere else on Black Ops 2.
After the flames die, there will be little left.
To bolster the undead forces, Origins introduced the Panzer Soldat, the most dangerous and difficult zombies mini-boss yet, fully equipped with terrifying weapons to ensnare and burn. Origins also included the Zombie Tank, echoing the transit bus from Black Ops 2's far humbler beginnings, taking players on circuits around the map. In addition to these larger iterations, Origins added a variety of smaller, more optional gameplay mechanics such as the dig sites and the challenges, giving players the chance to unlock different benefits varying in strength if they chose to seek them out. In all maps prior to Origins, the words Wonder Weapon prompted a very straightforward concept. Ever since Shi no Numa, maps had complemented a single wonder weapon that accentuated the identity of the map, with little to no iteration on this idea, until Origins. Rather than pack all the power of the world into a single weapon, Origins divided this power into 4 elemental staves. This iteration not only encouraged inclusion in multiplayer cooperation by giving all 4 players a wonder weapon rather than just one, but it also increased the replay value of the map, as players looked forward to experiencing the power of each elemental staff over the course of multiple playthroughs. In terms of ordinary weapons, Origins added a variety of new firearms, some taken from the multiplayer such as the Scar H, and some new to Black Ops 2 entirely, with iconic World War I style weapons like the MP40 from World at War to further immerse players. With the release of Origins, Treyarch had asserted a new understanding of the mode. From its inception, Call of Duty Zombies was never just zombies, bar Nuketown and Toten, but was identifiable by the environment of each map. Zombies in an insane asylum, zombies in an abandoned theater, zombies in a skyscraper, zombies on the moon. But since Mob of the Dead, the game had evolved one step further with the addition of greater fantasy, each new map putting a different spin on the game type. Zombies in a prison in hell, zombies in an old western town buried underground, zombies in World War I with giant robots. Origins sparked a new level of creativity, the giant robots being the most bizarre and iconic addition to any map, arguably ever. The robots would leave a lasting impression on players due to their sheer scale and ridiculousness, while also intriguing them as to their mysterious nature, vague mystery having been a core element of Call of Duty Zombies since the beginning. Alongside the giant robots, Origins delved further into the realms of fantasy by incorporating magic portals that led to another dimension. Every aspect of this feature was rich in showing off Treyarch's new creative prowess, from the unique art direction and design of Agatha to the methods by which the portals themselves were activated. The portals could only form after hearing certain music. After travelling to Agatha through a portal, similar, more alien-like music could be heard on the other side, communicating a direct relationship between the two. So subtle and incredible a feature further displayed the extent of creativity and attention to detail in Origins. Treyarch presented a new, heavily diverse and utterly inspiring soundtrack in Origins. Each track was totally unique, with a different piece of music playing at every distinguished location on the map, giving different areas and objectives their very own themes. While Buried and Mob of the Dead succeeded in being immersive with a decent number of original tracks, Origins' soundtrack was even more diverse, each track distinctly different from the last. With such an impressive dedicated soundtrack, the map would play like a movie, with a fitting new track playing to suit every aspect, be it exploring a crypt, riding a tank, or traversing the trenches. Just like Buried and Mob of the Dead, Origins had its own custom round change theme, instantly setting it apart from other maps. The end to every round was accompanied by pure ambience, followed immediately by the heart-racing transition into the start of the next round. In contrast to Mob of the Dead's and Buried's slower, more atmospheric round and start transition, Origins was more fast-paced and intense, pushing the idea that something needed to be done, some sort of mission needed completing. The amount of effort Treyarch put into the music alone on this map is staggering, and it speaks to how impressive Origins is as a whole. Every track was perfectly orchestrated to fit each intended atmosphere, reflecting the themes of the First World War, from somber to struggle to triumph. The dedication to music in Origins is phenomenal, and while Treyarch will continue to create impressive soundtracks for the maps in following games, such dedication has never since been replicated in another map. Origins was the result of Treyarch for the first time at the peak of their capabilities in every aspect of Call of Duty Zombies. The level design incorporated a perfect blend of different styles that succeeded in utilizing the best parts of both, while at the same time removing their individual issues and drawbacks. Origins offered fresh new mechanics that were perfectly balanced between being intuitive enough as to not alienate the audience, and being new and interesting enough to intrigue and engage players. The map also added an abundance of optional mechanics that allowed players to explore different playstyles without ever forcing them to do so. Finally, Origins featured an astounding original soundtrack that immersed players into the zombie-slaying experience like no other, with beautiful and unique sound design that made the map stand out as a true zombies icon. Origins was the culmination of what made previous maps successful, taken to the highest possible level. Masterful level design, fantastic mechanics, and immersive atmosphere. As the finale map of Black Ops 2, Origins was the pinnacle, the prime stage of the evolution of Call of Duty Zombies, and while later maps will surely reach the same level of caliber as Origins, no map will go beyond it ever again. Black Ops 2 Zombies went through iterative changes more drastic than any other Call of Duty Zombies game. The initial release was so different from the final product. When judging the maps, it's almost unbelievable that Origins and Transit, being so different, are in fact from the same game. A controversial game indeed, it is still wondered and debated by the most hardcore of fans of the Zombies mode whether the success of the game's final maps outweighed its dismally disappointing initial release. In the end, this value of maps and games is entirely subjective, and despite the regrettable first impression that Black Ops 2 may have left, even Transit must be a favourite among few. Black Ops 2 Zombies became the very definition of evolution, proceeding through a multitude of identifiably different states before reaching an ultimate apex stage. How could the game require any further change from the perfected gameplay of Zombies Origins? Time would tell. For 2 years and some months after the release of Origins in August 2013, Black Ops Zombies would rise from the grave once more.